Hi, and today I'd like to talk about RNG in World of Warcraft. Good RNG, bad RNG. I'm going to be covering the usual sources of RNG, particularly around loot and raiding, the legendaries, the Titan Forge system, but most especially what's caused me to want to do this vlog is, of course, the Netherlight Crucible, the new and very divisive form of RNG that's coming to World of Warcraft very soon indeed. And I think what I should do to begin with, because of course this is very subjective, what is good and what is bad RNG, I ought to sort of set out how I would define good RNG and bad RNG. And then if you disagree with that, you're probably going to disagree with a lot of what else I'm going to be talking about. So good RNG. RNG is good in a game because there's an anticipation for it. You know, not everything is the same every time you do. We repeat quite a lot of content, particularly in an MMO, but I think in any RPG, even a single player one. So having different outcomes when we do something fairly similar is a good thing in general. But with good RNG, I think that it smooths itself out. You know, the highs and lows smooth themselves out over a reasonable period of time. And also there's no real massive consequential effect between the highs and lows on the way a player plays a game, at least. That's not to say there aren't consequences between good and bad, but it doesn't have major consequences on the way you play the game. Now, bad RNG, I would say, is randomness that doesn't smooth itself out over a short period of time, and in particular where it has consequences. And I think especially poor RNG is one where it's not affected by skill as well. You can't stack the odds in your favour with any sort of skill or knowledge, and yet has a significant effect on your character. Now, examples of RNG in the game can of course include procs during a fight. This is one of the most famous examples of RNG in any sort of role-playing game. So on some fights, of course, especially at the start when you've got all your cooldowns going, you get some really nice procs and you're delighted. And that's a fun thing. No one's going to complain about that. There's the anticipation there. Am I going to get good procs? Am I not? And then when you do, you're utterly delighted. But then even when you're not, it's not disastrous. Sometimes actually it can be more annoying when you get really good procs, but then it's a wipe. The number of times on any given raid night where someone in my raid on a wipe will go, oh, rip rank 1. So when you don't, it's not so annoying for you, but it can actually be a source of fun, even that, for the Schadenfreuders in your guild, who enjoy the tormented, anguished cries of the poor victim who is now suffering really bad procs when on the previous go they had really good ones. So that sort of thing is pretty good. Then you've got traditional loot drops. Now, when I say traditional loot drops, I just mean the basis that bosses in a raid or dungeon or whatever, particularly a raid I'm thinking of, drop a certain number of items. Maybe it's the stuff you want, maybe it's not. At the start of a tier in particular is where you've got the greatest difference, because tier gear, for example, smooths itself out over a few weeks, so that's fine, but it's not there in the first week. Remember in Nighthold, for example, Conqueror tier just wasn't really dropping. I know what you're probably saying, oh, you're a Conqueror user, you just didn't get as much as you wanted. There were some Conqueror pieces that didn't drop at all until like the third or even fourth week. So yeah, we had pretty bad luck with that one. But again, we knew it smoothed itself out. Apart from the very top guilds, the vast majority of guilds are doing their crucial content several weeks in anyway, a good month into the tier. So, you know, when you know it's going to smooth itself out and everyone's going to be on a roughly even footing several weeks in, it doesn't matter that some people are going to get lucky in the first week and some not so much. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's tier or whether it's trinkets or that, you know, really crucial piece of loot. So that's a good RNG as well. You've got the anticipation, the boss dies, you want to know what's on it. You've got that good anticipation. But when it's not what you really want, it's not actually that disastrous because you know you're all going to be on even keel later on anyway. Now, in terms of non-traditional loot drops, we do have more of a problem with Titan Forge and legendaries. So legendaries, first of all, you can argue now is not as big a problem, because if someone has been playing the same character since the start of Legion, you've probably got them all now. I've now got them all on my for my main spec at any rate, which is the one I play for raiding. And, you know, I haven't like burnt myself out on doing all the content that can get you it. But at the start of Legion, I knew, for example, decent players who were losing raid spots because the difference between, say in the start, someone getting a couple of quick legendaries. I mean, people were getting a couple of quick legendaries before some people had got even one. And if they happened to get the 2 BIS legendaries, which, and some of them, particularly at Start Legion, significantly, massively even, increase the power of your character. And then you had someone else who either had no legendaries, or maybe they got one or something like that, and it was a really rubbish one. It was just no more than a stat stick, if it was even that. Was major, was huge. And that was not the sort of RNG that smooths itself out over a few weeks. You know, that was there. Some people I know that tell me that have been playing since the start, and they've got roughly the same number of legendaries I do, but still don't have that BIS one. They still don't have that one legendary, and certainly didn't at the start of even Tomb of Sargeras, which is the 3rd significant raid tier in Legion. So that, and even now you can argue that's still a bad one, because, you know, if people want to change spec, for example, or change class more specifically, then again, yeah, Blizzard have put a bit of bad luck protection in, so they understand that RNG can be harmful, even toxic to a gamer's experience. So they put in the bad luck protection, but you still got that issue where, okay, in theory you can get a couple of quick legendaries, but they could be the wrong ones. And the difference between them being the right ones and the wrong ones is huge, absolutely huge. Then we come to Titan Forging itself. Titan Forging is another one where, take for example, last night, we were doing Heroic Tomb of Sargeras on an off night, so just people who want to do it, and we had a 955 drop, a crit haste plate chest as it happens. Now, bear in mind, Heroic drops 915 baseline. This was a 40 item level increase on that. And the cap, you can't get better than this item for that particular item. And, you know, there were several people who wanted that. I actually didn't push hard on it because although in some future point it would be BIS for me, at the moment I'm not 100% that I would equip it because of other things I have. But nonetheless, you've got a situation when the 955 drops. Now, normally when a really nice item drops, let's say a trinket at the start of a tier, only one person can get it if one drops. And the rest of them can in that situation think, well, you know, I'll get it next time, or I'll get it. If there's several people want it, I'll probably have it in a few weeks' time, be all right. Something like this, you know it's not going to drop again. You know, you'd have to be you're stunningly lucky to get this drop at any point. But to get it to drop again, so the people who missed out on it that maybe wanted it will know that it's not going to happen again. Maybe they'll get a higher item level one, because I mean this is a boss we're killing on Mythic as well, so we could at least get a 930 baseline. Maybe we'll be lucky and get 935, 940 or something. The chances of it going to 955 even on Mythic are very remote indeed. So it's not like you can think, oh well, I'll get it at some point. You know, so that's quite a negative form of RNG. And this is why I know that the current legendary system and Titanforge might be tweaked a little bit for the next expansion, but it's not going away because it does what Blizzard want it to do. Now, that's another topic, so I'm not going to go into that now. So I understand that, but just to sort of explain why it is that Raiders, and I think particularly Mythic Raiders, don't like those systems. And that's the reason, really. This is something where the difference between good and bad RNG doesn't have a lot to do with, well, it doesn't have anything to do with skill. It doesn't have a lot to do with effort. So it has something to do with effort. Obviously, you can increase the amount of content, particularly through Mythic Plus dungeons, that increase your chances of getting some of these items. But it's still very RNG and it's very divisive. And to be able to get the proper big ones, 955, is absolutely huge and has a significant effect on your character. That's the issue of it. And therefore, you've got this sort of perception of injustice. And that's what makes for bad RNG. But more about that in a bit. So then you also, loot-related, have coins. Now, coins were introduced in MOP to allow people to have another go on a boss that drops an item they really want. Now, I would say this is good RNG. Some people, you know, it's sort of, it's quite a negative experience for them. But I think with those people, it's because they expect too much. When they use a coin, they're actually disappointed when they don't get loot. Now, you need to keep it into context. The coins have a small chance of giving you any loot at all. When it does give you loot, especially if there's only one particular thing you want off that boss, it's likely to have a loot table of at least 3 or 4 items for your spec. So again, it's a small chance of actually getting the item you want as well. So, but if people keep that in mind, it's actually a positive thing, because what it does allow you to do is to stack the odds in favour of getting the items that you want, because you choose which bosses to use it on. So you've got some involvement. It's not complete RNG. It's not completely taken out your hands. So there's a positive effect there in that you have some say in the outcome. because you're choosing which bosses to use these coins on. Now, where you get some really good RNG, I think, is in things like, say, world quests as an example. So with world quests, you can get some world quests that give you AP. You can get a buff from the Broken Shore sometimes that means you get extra AP from doing world quests, or maybe dungeons or raids as well. And you know, when you get that, that's quite nice. When you don't get it, it's not a disaster, because it's a bit of AP at the end of the day. It's not a massive amount. It's a nice amount, but it's not a massive amount. Then you've also got, again related to world quests, I suppose, Emissary Caches. So Emissary Caches, Mythic plus dungeon chests at the end of the dungeon, and the weekly cache as well, are all very, very positive sources of RNG, because with all of them, you've got actually the ideal RNG system in my view. You've got the anticipation, because these are all things you open, and you're hoping for something from it. So you've got that good level of anticipation. And then when you open it and you get something you really want, it's superb. You're delighted. But when you don't, it's not that harsh, because you're not expecting to get best items every time you open it. In fact, you're only expecting to get it every now and then. So take the weekly cache, for example. You know, a bit over a month ago, I got really nice item. Very, very nice. I don't expect to replace it anytime soon at all. So I was delighted. Now, for the last 4 weeks, I've been getting mastery legs, which is no use to me at all. But, you know, when that happens, you just roll your eyes, you go, oh, RNG. But you're not hugely disappointed. You know, same with the Emissary Cache. What you want to see with an Emissary Cache when it gets opened up is the orange sparkly, because what you're really looking for is a legendary. Yes, in theory, there could be a really high item level piece of decent gear in there. Chances are very slim. I've not had a single one that's been of use of me the whole expansion. And obviously, as the expansion rumbles on and on, that's much less likely, because although they occasionally increase the base item level, it's still falling further and further behind your own actual gear if you're into raiding. But legendaries, I mean, I've had 3 Emissary Caches at least that I can remember give me legendaries, and it may be a couple more, I can't remember. And when it happens, it's delighted. But when it doesn't happen, because, you know it's not gonna on most times, it's just like, okay, whatever. Now, where you've got a really toxic source of RNG, of course, and this is like the main thing that's hot topic at the moment, is the Netherlight Crucible. So I've already done videos on it, but just to discuss the RNG aspect of it. First of all, the traits that you can get, the hidden traits as I might call them, the second and third row of traits that you can get on a relic when the Netherlight Crucible comes in, is not at all affected by skill. There is nothing you can do to stack the odds in your favour or anything like that in the way that you can with, you know, procs that you get in during a fight. You can stack in your favour by choosing the most appropriate talents or gear or using your abilities better. You know, with loot drops, traditional loot drops from raids, you can use your coins on the better bosses. Think about that. So you've got some input. You've even got a little bit of input, if truth be told, on Titan Forge and Legendaries, because you can just do, if you've got the time for it, that is, more of the content that can potentially give you these things. But the Netherlight Crucible, there's nothing really you can do. You could, yes, carry on doing more and more stuff and hope to get a really high item level relic from Mythic Plus dungeons, and that potentially gives you more chances at it. But you've got to be fairly lucky just to even get a relic at the right item level at that point, because dungeons, of course, are behind raids, as they should be at the hardest mode, in terms of the gear they award, unless you're lucky with Titan Forge. Then you've got the extra RNG of what traits you get on it. But, I mean, that's just annoying. But, you know, when that was announced, when the Netherlight Crucible was announced, it was just annoying. It's like, you know, it does make you more powerful. But the difference between someone getting lucky with it and someone getting unlucky harks back to those early days of Legion, or even current days where someone re-rolls in terms of, do you get the good legendaries or do you get the bad legendaries? It's that level of difference, and could have, with 2 people of equal skill, equal gear and all the rest of it, could result in a significant difference to the output of each of those players, and that can have knock-on effects in terms of the enjoyment and the way you are able to play the game. But what's really bad about the Netherlight Crucible RNG-wise is, and very toxic about it, is that you can get a relic that at the moment is a definite upgrade, but it might be a downgrade with the Netherlight Crucible. The Netherlight Crucible can actually downgrade your relics. So what I mean by that, let's say, as happened this week, in fact, a fire relic drops, okay? And let's say it's exactly the same fire relic you've already got slotted. but it's +5 item level, so it's a definite upgrade. Clear upgrade. So there's several people for whom it's a clear upgrade. But in the here and now, you would just give it to the person for whom, you know, you just consider, okay, is it your best trait? You know, of those people for whom is it the best trait? Narrow it down to them and then decide on who it's the biggest upgrade for. With the Netherlight Crucible, you'll additionally be thinking to yourself, okay, well, there's also 2 more rows of traits you're going to get on it. So you, as a loot counter, you'll see if you can try and back. You're going to back the horse that you think has got the best chance of an upgrade, right? But you've got no way of knowing, but you just, you know, what's your best chance? So someone gets that relic. They take it back to the Netherlight Crucible, slot it in. Let's say their current fire relics have got mediocre traits on them. They're not BIS, far from BIS, but they're not the worst either. It could actually be worse. So there's a decent chance this is going to be an upgrade because it's +5 item levels and they've got mediocre traits on their current one. So they slot it in and it's got appalling traits on it. Absolutely shockers. To the point where you sort of sim it and it's like, this is a downgrade. This is a downgrade for me. I'm not slotting this in my weapon. Now at this point, the way I thought it might work, it doesn't work this way, is, okay, well it's within the 2 hours, you just give it to someone else in the raid, they slot it, oh, it's an upgrade for them, they equip it. That's not happening. Once you slot it into the Netherlight Crucible, it's bound to you. Now it was always going to be annoying that every few bosses everyone would have to go to the Netherlight Crucible, slot the relics that they've been awarded and then pass it to someone else if it turns out not to be an upgrade after all. That was going to be a pain in the arse. But it would still allow you to effectively use these relics as an upgrade for your raid, because that's what's most important. That's why raiders and guilds, not in pugs, of course, where no one's got any real concern for anyone else if it's a genuine pug. But in raid guilds, you're interested in what's best for the raid. That is why people will look at a piece of gear and go, well, that's an upgrade for me. But you know what? I think it's a bigger upgrade for someone else, so I'm just going to pass. That's why that sort of thing happens, that you wouldn't, of course, get in a pug. That goes out the window. You're unable to do that. So you can have this thing that you sort of know should be an upgrade for your raid. If you knew what traits were on it, then people could make a more informed decision. You could give it to someone and make your whole raid stronger. Now, it's totally in the lap of the gods. So you can imagine how bad it's going to feel for someone thinking they've got this upgrade and it's not an upgrade. Then imagine how bad it is for the other people because they're thinking, well, could have been an upgrade for me. And then everyone just feels bad out of that. Because this thing has now gone to waste. It's now a chaos crystal or just a bit of gold being sold to a vendor. And the other big problem with it is because there's no skill to it, there's nothing you can do to try and work it out. It again comes down to this perception of injustice. It's a form of RNG that has no skill at all. You can't even do anything to stack the odds in your favour. There's no way of knowing. Someone's going to lose out if you make the wrong decision, even though it's only in hindsight you can see it was the wrong decision. So you've got this huge perception of injustice with the system. You know, the feeling you get when it goes wrong is not enough to compensate the feeling you get when it goes right. And, you know, there's enough injustice in the world as it is. Let's face facts. When you play a fantasy role-playing game, doesn't matter whether it's an MMO or a single player, when you play a fantasy role-playing game, you are playing escapism. Same as when you read a book, in fact. You're playing a game where when there's injustice in it, it's conquered, you smite it. There's no injustice inherent within the game systems itself. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be meritocratic. But then this becomes the very opposite of that. This becomes just how successful you are. It's like playing snakes and ladders instead of chess. You know, how successful you are is entirely based on the roll of the die. You could get a machine to roll for you. Nothing you do can possibly affect the game. And that is what is really bad RNG in my view, and in the view of others. But anyway, that's just my opinion. As I said, this is very subjective. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching. If you want more content like this, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.